Okay. Why that happened. Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. This show is going to be a little different from my usual 25-minute mass monologue because today I'm going to talk about quilting. My wife is a big quilter, and I have here with me a local quilter, Miss Kathy Dargill.
Yes.
And she is a quilter, and she's proud of it. Are you proud of it?
I certainly am, yes.
Okay, great. The reason she's here is because there's going to be a big quilt show. The quilt show is going to be on January 13th and 14th, 2006, on a Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday the 15th. It'll be from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. My wife is going to have her quilt in it, so I've got to talk about it. And I'm happy to talk about it because it's a great thing, in my opinion. And anybody who likes quilts, please stay on. Anybody who could stand my normal show, you can change the channel. So anyway, we are going to talk about the quilt show. And on top of that, I have a second camera with an Elmo and talk about high tech. This is Miss Dargill with her car. She's not selling it or giving it away in front of last year's winning quilt. I'm going to go back to us. And behind us is a famous quilt too. What is that quilt?
Well, that is the same quilt that is in that picture. That was our Best of Show winner from last year. It won a judge's first place. It won viewers' first place. And it's also the calendar cover of a very popular quilt calendar.
Oh, tell me about the quilt calendar. And the reason I'm interested in it is because my wife has had a quilt in it in the past.
Okay. This particular one is the cover of Quilt Art Engagement Calendar from the American Society of Quilters from Paducah, Kentucky. As a matter of fact, the lady who made that quilt, her name is Amy Bright. She's a local lady. And that quilt was hung in our show. And the editor of the Quilt Art Calendar actually came to Tucson to tell her that her quilt was going to be selected as that cover during our show. So I had a chance to actually meet the editor and talk to her about this quilt too, and they were very much in awe of it.
So can I say that this is not just a regular quilt show, that this is nationally renowned?
Yes, it is. In Tucson, we have wonderful quilters who are throughout the country who come here to winter. We have people from not only the 50 United States, but also other countries who call Tucson their winter home and then exhibit in our show. So we have national award-winning quilters from almost every state that come here.
How big is quilting?
It's been really phenomenal. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, actually. I used to own a quilt store, so I knew a little bit more about it than the average person. I've been quilting for about 30 years, and quilting has enjoyed a real big popularity for all of those 30 years.
Well, I am surprised that you could have been doing anything for 30 years.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I was a baby, yes.
Yeah, right. Oh, so you started quilting as a baby.
Actually, I was a undergraduate at the University of Michigan, and I started at that time. And that's when I made my first quilt, when I was at the University of Michigan.
Oh, yeah? Mm-hmm. And what does it take to make a quilt like that? Are those hand done, or are those done with machines?
That one is both hand and machine done. It is machine pieced, it is hand appliqued, and I believe it was hand quilted. So that quilt took quite a bit of time. And that particular quilter is a bus driver for one of the local school districts. Oh. And so this quilting would be maybe her second job.
Okay, let's hope she wasn't quilting while she was driving.
Definitely not.
Yeah, okay. That's good
But
news.
that's your stress reliever, I think, from the kids.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, what does it take to make a quilt like that? A lot of people out there, of course, know the quilting terms. I'm familiar with a few of them, but a lot of people don't know what you mean by pieced or applique. So why don't you explain what that is?
Well, piecing is when, whether by hand or by machine, you place two pieces of fabric right sides together and you stitch those two pieces of fabric together. Applique instead involves a layering kind of technique where one layer is placed on top of the other. Maybe the raw edges are turned under, and then it is like whip stitched or stitched down onto the main piece of fabric. The center of that quilt, that yellow and all those bright starbursts and things, that is all the pieced portion. The curlicues on the outside, that is the applique portion.
Okay, all right. Now, applique is basically taking something and just stitching it right onto the top. So those like quilts that are like little pictures of birds and so on and so forth. Those are usually applique.
Many times you can do, quilters prefer one or the other usually. You're either a piecer, you're an appliquer. Some people call it the A word because they really don't like to applique as much as they like to piece. Some people do both.
Okay. Now, is it more classy to do this by hand, or is it different little groups that compete against one another, the hand stitch, the applique, and the machine stitch, or is everybody go in a big competition against everybody else?
Generally, you have some kind of categories. In our show, we also have categories, and the judges look within that category for specifics. Many times a pieced quilt will be entered in the piece category, and whether it's machine or hand pieced, it doesn't matter. It'll be judged within that category. The appliques, strictly applique, would be judged in a separate category, and then the mixed media, which is this one, like this quilt, would be then both applique and piecing, whether it's again by hand or machine. It would be irregardless of that. It would be what type of techniques are used.
So how many quilts do you have at a typical quilt show, or do
We
you expect
have
at this one?
we should have around 300 plus quilts. We will have our main quilt show, which is member only show. That means that all the quilts exhibited in the quilt show will be members of the Tucson Quilters Guild.
Oh, so outsiders are not allowed to show quilts?
Not in this show, no. We have 650 plus members at this time. And as we've been expanding considerably, we try to always get a quilter's first priority into the quilt show. And we have again done that this year, so we are members only. But we also then will have a special couple exhibits, one being a kids row, where we are having some of the local children in this area who make quilts. We're going to have an area designated for them to show and exhibit their quilts. Last year we did the kids row for the first time. It was very popular. We even had some of the makers come, the kids themselves, come and stand beside their quilts, and so that they could talk to the public about their quilts, and that proved to be a real great thing for both the kids and I think the public.
So you got the members, and then you have the kids row, and you have what, about 1,000 quilts in this thing?
Well, no, it'll probably be around, as I said, about 350. In addition, we also have approximately 50 vendors. And within each of the vendor booths, there will be some more quilts that the vendors are selling, either patterns or fabric or things like that. So in addition to what we are exhibiting in the main areas, all of these other quilts we also will have a guest speaker. Her name is Pepper Corey, and she is going to be bringing her quilts. So she should have about a dozen of her quilts that are also there in the demo area to be shown. So in all reality, we could have like 500 different kinds of quilts or garments, quilted garments represented within the convention center area.
Would this be a quilted garment?
This is a quilted garment I'm wearing, yes.
Okay. All right, it's beautiful. All right. So you have a lot of people making quilts, showing their quilts. You must have a pretty big organization. How big is this quilt guild?
The guild is at this time over 650, 679 or something to that effect. We have, this year we've had to expand in order to just facilitate everyone coming to meetings. We are now doing both Tuesday night meetings as well as Wednesday meetings, so that all of the membership can actually attend and listen to speakers and do show and tell and things like that without us over-expanding the capacity of the rooms that we rent.
All right, that's great. Okay, and do you have any quilts in it?
This year I don't. I am the Quilt Show co-chair. This is my second year, and I am working very hard on getting the Quilt Show up and set up. And so this year I'm not doing that. Next year I will, but this year I'm taking a year off.
Oh, I see. So you haven't done much actual quilting?
No, I've been actually doing the organization, meeting with the convention center staff and meeting with the members and the committees. I have like 25 different departments underneath me arranging everything from the tickets that are sold to the publicity to you name it, and we do it.
All right. You wouldn't know whether my wife has any quilts in this show.
I actually have a list of everybody.
Oh,
yes.
you do? Okay, all right.
I do. I believe she does.
Okay,
I
there you
remember
go.
seeing her name.
All right, so I'm going to root for my wife.
Okay, and it's viewer's choice. And
her name is Meg Silvern. So you have judges, and the judges judge the #1 quilt in every category, and then you have viewer's choice. Now, a lot of people don't know what that means or how that works. What is a viewer's choice, and how proud should somebody be that they won it?
Well, last year we had in excess of 6,000 people come through the quilt to see the quilts at the quilt show. And it is the viewers who then take the moments to check off their ballots as to what their favorite quilt is. They are the ones that assign the viewer's choice. Last year we changed it a little bit. We only had one main winner. This year we're going back to maybe our older system whereby we are going to be doing many winners depending on the size and the type of techniques. If someone comes in and votes for a particular quilt, we may have more than one winner, as I'm saying. The judges, that part of it, the guild members get to choose whether or not they want their quilt judged. Some people are not comfortable enough with having outside people look at their quilts and really critically examine them. So this is an option. It is not mandatory for guild members to have the judges do this, but the guild members are offered this free of charge. They get to select whether or not they want their quilt judged. And those people who select to have their quilts judged, we will have them turned in. And a couple of days actually before the quilt show is hung, the judges come to town, and we set up all of the quilts on tables, and we have the judges really examine them. And I was privileged to see the judging last year. It took 2 days, literally 2 full 8-hour days to do that, and we ended up going into a third day. So they really take the time to look at the stitches and how the quilt looks, the type of design elements that a quilter chooses, the fabric, and all of the basic decisions that quilters, and there's hundreds of them, quilters use to put together a quilt. The judges took the time to look at everything and then to critique it and to fill out a little written form.
Okay. How do you know somebody didn't just go to Walmart and buy a Chinese quilt and then, of course, cut out the...
we can tell.
You can tell?
We can
All
tell.
right, okay.
And again, it would be something where we probably have seen those kind of quilts in the department stores and things like that. There are certain patterns and there are certain fabrics, and also the condition of them. Pretty much I would, in my personal opinion, the quilts from China are very much inferior to what you're going to be seeing in this show. We wouldn't hang probably any of those type of quilts.
Well, you should have a sample bad quilt from China so that you can show people how much better we do it over here.
Well,
Yeah.
the real proof is in the washing. I've seen people who try to wash those Chinese quilts and they literally come apart. These particular quilts won't do that.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm not getting down on China or Chinese-made goods, although it is irritating that we have such a trade deficit with them. But basically the point is over here is that these are handmade by locals.
That's correct.
And that's the purpose of the Quilt Club. Apparently the ladies, and I assume a couple men,
We have about 5 or 6 gentlemen that are members of the organization.
just have a wonderful time. I'm going to pull this down a little bit. Have a wonderful time making quilts, spending a lot of time on it. I know my wife makes quilts for my boys' teachers every single year, and she's in there just crafting away, just having a great time. And a lot of people do have a great time with it.
Yes. And speaking of special occasion type of quilts, I just went through the entries that we have gotten and pulled out some of the reasons that quilters made these particular quilts. We have wedding quilts, first communion quilts, 75th birthday quilts, a baby quilt, many baby quilts, but one in particular, the maker indicated that it took 29 years in the making. And the gentleman is now having a baby of his own.
Oh, yeah?
Before he gets it, he's now becoming a father.
Okay.
We have anniversary quilts, Christmas quilts. We celebrate the fall leaves turning, the Mexican Day of the Dead. For grandchildren, we celebrate the desert that we live in, as well as the trips that we take to Hawaii, Japan, England. And we also have one quilter who summers at the Isle of Man, and she always has wonderful quilts that she makes there and shows us. And it's a much different kind of country that she lives in during the summer than here.
I'll bet, yeah. And I'll be going to the UK pretty soon, too, so we'll see it. Let me ask you a little bit about the history of quilting. I know this is probably a little irrelevant, but I went to a exhibition, and apparently before the Civil War, the slaves and the people who were in the Underground Railroad would put quilts up that had specific designs that were code. And they would tell the people whether the bad guys were coming, whether the coast was clear, and so on and so forth. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, this is the underground rail system where slaves were smuggled in up from the south through up into the north, and to get to mention safe passage. Sometimes quilts would hang out on the railings as if they were being aired. And yet that was a code that this particular house, it was a safe house and people could come in and they could stay there. Sometimes they would have significant details on the quilts like mountains, and this meant that they were supposed to then take passage through the mountains in the local area. Things like that are been documented as actually having happened.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Drunkard's Walk design?
Drunkard's Path, yes.
Drunkard's Path.
Yes, I have. It's a half circle kind of thing. I'm not sure. It fell out of vogue during Prohibition here in the United States, but it's come back, and it's still a popular pattern.
Yeah, but I think that if that was up, it meant take another path.
That's correct.
Yeah,
I think
so that was one of the little symbols that came up, and I guess everybody codes, and the name that was really the code name ended up becoming the name of the design. So I guess some of the old-time designs really go back to that era.
They go back farther than that, yeah. Actually, quilting starts way back in the Egyptian era.
Egyptian?
Yes.
They had quilts?
They had, quilted garments.
Quilted garments, okay.
And actually they used them for, the warriors would use them to try to deflect the spears and things like that. I'm not sure that it worked well, but there are actually elements of quilting that are found in the Egyptian tombs.
Now, is it possible the coat of many colors was a quilted garment?
Oh yes, it was. Yes,
it was
made popular by Dolly Parton in her song. But yes, the coat of many colors was basically a patchwork kind of quilt, where little pieces of fabric that, again, with poor people in the Appalachian area, where it was too cheap, too expensive for the fabric, they would sew every little scrap together, and that's basically how patchwork evolved in the United States. Is during after the Mayflower and the times of early settlers, where fabric had to be imported into this country, because before we started actually making our own fabric in the United States, everything was imported in that regard, and so fabric was held very dear, and every little scrap was used.
So they would take all their old scraps and their torn up blankets and stuff like that, and they would start quilting it together into a jacket or something.
Patchwork or quilts to warm themselves over the cold winter nights, yes.
Now, did quilts, as opposed to quilted garments, did they come in Europe, or is that an American invention?
Much of the patchwork work has always been American. It's uniquely American, patchwork itself. Quilted garments, again, depending on their use and the types of patchwork. I have patchwork on my jacket here. Again, that would be more American than European or any other nationality.
Because we lived in Europe for a while. I was stationed there, and quilting is catching on over there. My wife went to a quilt show every year in Alsace-Lorraine, in eastern France, and they were very excited that the American quilter was going to their show. So apparently it's catching on. You wouldn't know whether it's catching on in Asia as well.
Oh yes, definitely. Many, if you see any of the international quilt shows, many of the award winners are Japanese specifically.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Many wonderful quilters have come out of there, putting again a different spin, an Asian type spin on quilting. Again with patchwork, but you can definitely tell the Asian influence there versus the American influence.
Yeah, I guess the Japanese really like crafts and
Yes, they do.
high art crafts.
And quilting is certainly one of them.
There's no doubt about it. Okay, I'm going to put a quilt over here onto the Elmo. Now let's see if we can get the glare down, and I don't think I can. Maybe if I go this way. Okay, you can all discuss while I'm doing that. Okay, I'm going to put one up over here. What would this take to make?
Well, this was our raffle quilt last year, and it took lots of time. We had probably 50 different guild members working on that. Both there are applique blocks and there are piece blocks. I made one of the piece blocks myself.
Can you find it?
No.
Oh, okay,
not,
all right.
No, not. One turned in. It kind of disappears from my memory. But we had many people working on that, and that quilt was raffled off at the end of our quilt show. Every year, the guild members put together one quilt that we assemble specifically for this purpose, and we raise several $1,000s usually through our efforts.
And that's what, about 7 by 6 or?
It's a queen size quilt. It's
Oh,
probably
queen
by
size, okay.
90 something by 108. The one that we have done for this year is a little bit larger, and it again we've had it appraised, and it appraises for several $1,000s.
Okay, that's the next thing I was going to ask. Quilt like that would have how many hours of labor in it? 100 hours by 20 different people, like you said, or how long would it take people to actually sit there and
Each
piece
quilt-
and applique and
Each quilt will be
do all
different. The quilt,
but that big one?
it takes us a full year to assemble it and put it together, from the design time to the final quilting. We do both machine quilting sometimes and hand quilting. It depends on the particular quilt that we do. Last year's quilt was machine quilted, and so it probably took us, just for the making of the quilt alone, a couple of 100 hours. And then there's the machine quilting, which, because of the machines that we have nowadays, that does go very much faster, but still you're talking about 20 to maybe 40 hours.
So even if you were valuing the people's time at $10 an hour, just the labor would be worth $3,000.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
We're probably talking about, you're probably looking at 10 cents an hour for labor
Well,
at this point.
Okay. But if somebody went and had something like that appraised, it would be $3,000-$4,000.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And are there quilts? Are there certain quilters that are like fine artists? Their stuff is worth tens of thousands of dollars?
Oh yes, yes, and we actually have one of the guest speaker that we'll be having at our quilt show coming up in January. That's January 13th, 14th, and 15th. Pepper Corey is a very well-known quilter. She certainly has quilts that would appraise in that category. She's a teacher. She's a lecturer. She owned a quilt store. She's very well known in the quilting establishment.
Because I know that they have in museums, they have textile art, and so that would qualify as
quilts
textile art.
definitely
Okay.
do.
All right. So there's a Picasso out there who has a $100,000 quilt they have yet to make.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that sounds great. So let me repeat when this thing is going to be on. It's going to be January 13th and 14th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sunday, January 15th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And there's a preview party. I think it's only for the in group. And I guess to go for a day, it's $7. And for all 3 days, it's $15. And they actually collect, tens of thousands of dollars on this thing, right?
We do, and this is the money that we raise. The Tucson Quilters Guild is a nonprofit. The money we raise goes to fund all of our works that we do throughout the year, putting on both educational classes for our members, as well as we do a lot of charity work through the community, making quilts. The Guild will buy the supplies, and we will have our members make the quilts.
Okay, I'm going to have to say the name of the show is Fed Pride, and the reason it's called Fed Pride because I'm a federal worker and proud of it, and we're proud of the quilts.